I get an epic fight, I really can't wait any longer.
You're also looking for. Hey everybody, it's Mike One Up here, and I'm gonna go over the Budget Whirlwind Guide. This is what I use to get to 100 first on the NA servers, so hopefully this helps. Quick thing I'm gonna go over right away is the Trial of Might. The Trial of Might monsters will give you boosted experience, and not many people know about this. Every time you kill one, you gain big chunks. So I highly recommend every time you see this trial, you do it and enjoy the EXP gains. As you can see, the build is really strong. You can just stand right on the fires, and this will help you out. Over here, we're going to show you the potential of the end game. This is Keegan, one of the bosses at the end. As you can see, the build can stand right in the middle, chunking away at his life, ignoring most of the mechanics, and you'll have a good time. You watched my first guide that helped you jump to the end game, and you were able to do that as quickly as I did. So you're able to get there, and right now you're standing at maps within 3 hours of gameplay. So we're going to pick up where that left off, and we're going to talk about what you do as soon as you get to maps. Once you reach maps, I suggest progressing through the maps in a linear fashion. What that means is you're going to start off at time mark number 1 at Glacial Abyss. You will clear 4 maps to unlock the Watcher and then defeat the Watcher. This will give you the Ember. Once you have the Ember, you'll be able to switch over to Boiling Lava time mark 1 and repeat the same process. This will give you the second Ember. Continue this process all the way through in a linear fashion. You're going to go to now time mark 2 Glacial Abyss, clear it out, get the Ember. Time mark 2 Boiling Lava, clear it out, and get the Ember. Continue for time mark 3. At this point you'll do Steel Forge. Once you defeat Steel Forge time mark 3, you will unlock the ability to craft. At this point, we will go and check our gear out, fill in any resistances we're missing and may need, as well as adding whatever damage boosts to our weapons that we can. We will come back to the maps, and we'll continue progressing in that linear fashion, going back to time mark 4 Glacial Abyss, time mark 4 Boiling Lava, time mark 4 Steel Forge, and so on. The reason we do this is because we will need to get every single Ember anyway. So it is more beneficial to complete the maps when they are appropriately leveled to you. You will gain more experience by being the same level, as well as it will make it faster and easier to clear. While you're progressing through this, keep an eye on the ground for any gear that you will use, such as axes, armor helmets, armor chests, armor boots, and so on. You keep an eye out for this, holding on to any good modded gear you find. You can either just slam it right on to get a boost, or you can go to the crafter to finish off the crafts and enchants to round out the resistances and add more damage to it. I'm going to show you how to attempt to craft a budget axe. And this may help you find, if you can't find any axes that are good, you always have this available as an option as you collect more resources. First thing we're going to want to look for is added gear physical damage. So we're going to roll until we find one of those. And we have found one. We will select it. We will now move on to find percent gear physical damage. We got 50% physical. This is also good. We'll grab this. Continue looking for our gear physical. We now have our gear physical. We'll select this. We'll go down to our bottom craft here, and we are going to look for attack speed or critical strike damage. We now have our attack speed, so we'll put this on. Here we have two choices. If you have the ruling ember, you can look for your 2 to 4 added physical attack damage per strength. Or if you're still on a budget, you can look for your gear attack critical strike damage. I have the embers, so we will try to get this. We now have landed it, but we landed it in a spot we don't really want. However, since this is a really good roll, we have no problem replacing our first one, and we're going to take this with a smile. We'll then go back up to our our essence ember, and try to get that our mod back. We want it on the lower part here. Well, that's also a good row. So we're going to add it. It's on the one we want to replace it. So that's perfect. We have the moss energy. We're going to add that. Now we have the choice of going down here. We're going to look for our gear attack, our critical strike damage. We have found it. It's not good, but we have it. Finally, once we have our budget axe put together, we can finish off with an enchant. There we go. And this enchant will be strength. So we're going to roll down to the bottom here. We're going to pick the cheapest option available, and we're going to put our strength on. And this is the ideal looking budget axe. If you can afford it and you have the resources, obviously try to get higher rolls in all of these categories, the higher you go. But these are the main stats you're looking for when you're looking for a budget axe craft. For our talents, we're going to start off with God of Might. Here we're going to prioritize attack damage, attack speed, critical strike rating and critical strike damage, more attack damage, extra weapon damage, 1 strength node to be able to unlock weapon attack speed, and then we will finish off with that last strength node to unlock our big talent. As for our big talents, I recommend starting with the tenacity, as this will give you a way to start generating tenacity blessings as well as a maximum stack. You will also use great strength to begin with, as we do not have 100% conversion at this point, so we'll use great strength for a damage boost.
Help yourself to the catalog.
At this point, we swap over to a warlord and fill the tree in like this. We're going to get maximum life, attack speed, more life and life regain, more critical strike rating, and critical strike damage. Now we can get our 50% physical damage converted to fire damage. Comboed with the support skill gem in our whirlwind early on, this will now give us 100% physical to fire damage. We now move back to the first tree and more life and life regain, more critical strike rating, and critical strike damage. Now we can get our 50% physical damage converted to fire damage. Comboed with the support skill gem in our whirlwind early on, this will now give us 100% physical to fire damage. We now move back to the first tree and select our fueling. We will return to this tree and finish it out. We're going to pick up 1% fire damage per 50 strength, as well as weakened enemies when area skills deal damage, which is all the time for whirlwind. Finally, we'll finish off with own 1 additional stack of tenacity blessing, and it'll give you a small skill radius per stack. For our big nodes, we're going to select rock, as this will give us 2 more maximum stacks of tenacity, as well as adding the 15% fire damage per stack of tenacity blessing owned. Finally, we're going to end with focus blow, which will allow you to deal more damage the closer you are to the enemy, so it's a good idea to be as close to them as you can while you're fighting without standing right in front of them. We're going to finish off with the ranger tree, prioritizing our critical strike rating, our critical strike damage, our attack speed, more attack damage. We're going to pick up a life node here, This will allow us to start working on our favor tree. And go back to life to finish that off. Once we pick up this talent node, we will now be able to get favor as soon as we're near enemies. This will allow us to use fluke. This is a big damage spike. At this point is when you want to activate fluke. As you saw as I was placing my skills, you're going to unlock this node before you get that talent. So I recommend using gravity until you unlock the favor node, which will activate fluke. At this point, we're going to finish out our tree with more damage. More critical strike rating and damage. We'll finish off our life. We'll also pick up additional armor and elemental resistance, as well as this, which is a big defensive layer to stop you from taking extra damage. We now have the ability to unlock impending. We'll select impending, and we'll continue out our tree here with 12% damage, 30% maximum life. We'll go back to our first tree. We'll finish off our strength stack. We'll finish out our maximum life and regain. And then finally, once you start pushing into the tippy tops of the end game, you get closer to 100, we're going to round out our tree with more maximum life. For our hero traits, we're going to start off with anger, frenzy, furious, rampaging, boiling anger, and reverberation. I highly recommend staying with reverberation while you're leveling. If at any point you feel like you want a damage boost and you're okay with playing on a riskier scale, you can use uncontrolled anger. However, you will be more susceptible to death and you may lose a lot of experience. I highly recommend staying in reverberation while you're leveling. For what we socket into burst, I use harden and mark. Every time we burst, this will trigger and we burst a lot. What harden does is give us a huge defensive layer, and it's really good to have this active at all times. Every time we burst, we have harden. We will always have harden active like this. Following that same principle, we will always debuff the enemies with mark. Mark is a debuff that will allow the enemies to take extra critical strike damage, which is a huge damage boost, and that is why we have harden and mark in our hero traits. For our skills, we will start off with whirlwind. We're going to add channel preparation, steamroll, guard, attack focus, and physical to allow the enemies to take extra critical strike damage, which is a huge damage boost, and that is why we have harden and mark in our hero traits. For our skills, we will start off with whirlwind. We're going to add channel preparation, steamroll, guard, attack focus, and physical to fire. Once you have the gloves that will give you 50%, you will be able to switch this support skill to bloodthirsty slaughter. For potion, we're going to add channel preparation, steamroll, guard, attack focus, and physical to fire. Once you have the gloves that will give you 50%, you will be able We will start off with whirlwind. We're going to add channel preparation, steamroll, guard, attack focus, and physical to fire. Once you have the gloves that will give you 50%, you will be able to switch this support skill to bloodthirsty slaughter. Once you have critical strike damage, we'll start off guard for potion.
I am the strongest warrior in Valgong. Who dares to face me?
Ah. Since we already got that build, we're just gonna. We are at 49%. We're just gonna double check how much we're getting.
Keep fighting! From victory to victory! hearty Valga battle indeed. Never felt better.
So around 40. So 10%. Great.
From victory to victory. Never felt better. A hearty Valga battle indeed.
86%.
I'll get challenge.
Steamroll, guard, attack focus, and physical to fire. Once you have the gloves that will give you 50%, you will be able to switch this support skill to Bloodthirsty Slaughter. For potion, we have two choices. We have Compound Potion, which functions on a cooldown of 8 seconds, which is great for fighting bosses. Alternatively, for maps, we have Life Source. This will recharge as you kill monsters. So it's a lot better for maps. You can run out of cooldowns versus bosses. So I recommend switching to Compound Potion for bosses. Attached to these potions, we have Residues, Berserk, and Armor Infusion. For leap attack, we want Quick Mobility, Periodic Burst, and Blinding. We use Reform with cooldown reduction, extended duration, cost conversion. We use our Bloodthirst, supported with Mania, Bloodbath, cost conversion, and Mass Effect. For our auras, we want to use Charged Flame, Flame Imbue, and Erosion Amplification. It's very important you make sure these 3 auras are linked to mana. Seal them on mana. We will use Steadfist, Rejuvenation, and Nimbleness with a seal conversion, so these will use our life to support them. Finally, we have Cast on Critical Strike with Scorch, Fixate, cost conversion, so we use our life, and Abysmal Hatred. Finally, when you get near to the end, closer to the end game, you'll be able to unlock this talent. Here you will want to use Swiftness. However, keep in mind that you need to keep your Swiftness low level, as you may not have enough mana to activate it. I can only activate a level 8, for instance. If I were to put in a level 9, it would cost me too much mana, and I won't be able to activate it. I'm going to go over some of the base gear stats you're looking for. Ideally, you want to pick this stuff up off the ground and then continue crafting it, or just craft it yourself. I'm going to go over some of the base gear stats you're looking for. Ideally, you want to pick this stuff up off the ground and then continue crafting it, or just craft it yourself. For your helmet, you want to make sure you have as much life and maximum life as you can get, and then fill in your missing resistances. An additional defensive layer, such as physical damage taken converted to fire damage, is always nice. For your chest, you want to follow the same principle of putting as much life and maximum life as you can, fill in your remaining resistances, as well as whatever extra defensive layer you can get, such as minus 50% extra physical damage taken. For your neck, the important thing here is +1 channel of energy. This is a very rare, craftable mod. You can either find it on the ground, you can try to craft it, or you can look for it in the auction house to see if you can find a cheap neck that has this +1 channel of energy. Once you have that, on a budget basis, you're just, as well as whatever extra defensive layer you can get, such as minus 15% extra physical damage taken. For your neck, the important thing here is +1 channeled energy. This is a very rare, craftable mod. You can either find it on the ground, you can try to craft it, or you can look for it in the auction house to see if you can find a cheap neck that has this +1 channeled energy. Once you have that, on a budget basis, you're just going to want to add life, fill in your missing resistances, and enchant on an extra little damage boost. For your gloves, this is very important. You're looking for at least 50% physical damage converted to fire damage. Once you have this on your gloves, you'll be able to replace your support node in Whirlwind with Bloodthirsty Slaughter. Additionally, you're also looking for maximum life, added physical damage, and filling out your resistances, Additional strength here is always nice. For your boots, same principle. Maximum life percent, fill in your missing resistances, and get whatever defensive layer you can, such as -9% extra physical damage taken. This is where the build will start costing a little bit more. This is a very important ring. I recommend saving all your flame elementium and making this your priority first purchase, as it will be a huge damage spike. This will allow you to have Bull's Rage active every 4 seconds. Here, you're looking for a ring to trigger your blessing gains. I have a ring that lets me gain every single blessing through it. This is a rare ring, it's hard to find. Alternatively, in the meantime, you can use a ring that looks like this, where it fills in your missing resistances, as well as giving you damage or life. I went with life regeneration here because I found it like this. Alternatively, you should prioritize putting maximum life here. As for your belt, well, this one's going to be a rare one, and it's going to cost you a lot. This will be your second purchase. You're looking for a belt that has quick ritual. This will give you another minimum channeled energy stack, but you want to have 5 channeled energy at all times. This is important as it will make your whirlwind deal 40% more damage. As for the rest of the stats, well, they're kind of random, so you're just going to have to look at what's available for the price and gauge what has the most usable mods. I got lucky with mine. Mine gives me extra life regen, a bigger barrier shield, more life regeneration, as well as a damage boost per blessing, and I have a lot of blessings. For your axes, you're looking to get added physical damage, 2 to 4 added physical damage per X strength. I recommend here using, as you're leveling, a gear physical mod. I have this here as an end game craft, and you can put it here, but while you're leveling, you're staying at full life. You're not losing life. So this was kind of a dead mod while you're leveling. I recommend putting a gear physical percent or gear physical global. Physical damage global. For your suffixes, you're looking for attack speed, critical strike damage, and 71 strength. These are your budget crafts, not your ominous crafts. Later on, you will want to add ominous crafts here to maybe replace strength with double damage, or alternatively, other end game crafts. You want to get a weapon that's similar to this on both weapons. Here you can see I have the physical damage mod I was telling you about to replace this damage mod up here. Thank you very much for checking out my very first Torchlight guide, the Budget Whirlwind. This is what I used to get to 100. Hopefully you learned something here and you can implement those skills into your own gameplay. If you have any comments to help me improve my next guide or improve this video, please leave them in the comments below. Other than that, I wish you all the best of luck in your hunt, and I'll see you all in game.
Wimp. Not yet. The hardy Valga battle indeed. Keep fighting from victory to victory. I'm too tired. Keep fighting! From victory to victory! Wimp! A hearty Valga battle indeed. Never felt better.
If you stand on one foot while holding a glass of lemon water, while putting apple cider vinegar in your ear, of course while being fasted, while standing on a treadmill backwards, you're going to get all these benefits. Okay. Sometimes that's what it feels like. And I understand that even the content on this very channel gives you a lot of little bricks that ultimately go into the wall of weight loss, longevity, just overall lifestyle. But we cannot forget what I would consider the Holy Grail. Okay, the Holy Grail is simple. When all else fails, caloric restriction works. This does not mean that I'm turning my back on the fasting world, because fasting still obviously has elements of caloric restriction. My point is that if you ever get tired of stacking all these different bricks in the wall, I don't get tired of it because I love the complexity of it. I love these little pieces. Remember that caloric restriction is very important. So this video is going to highlight the benefits of simple caloric restriction when you just don't have the mental capacity to worry about the other things. Bottom line is we don't need as much food as we think. We can live in a deficit much easier than people think, okay? So we think food is fuel, so we need to constantly fuel ourselves, and that's how we stay alive. No, it's a delicate balance of giving us enough fuel, but also periodically restricting so we get stronger and more resilient and also preserve our cells, if that's how you really want to put it. The first thing I want to address is mitochondrial function. It's a great place to start, and how caloric restriction affects mitochondrial function. If the mitochondria are the factories that produce energy, we want more factories, right? And if we start losing factories, we don't have cellular function. And if we start losing, or the factories start getting dirty, they don't produce energy, and we start having exhaust and dysfunction. If the roads leading to and out of the mitochondria are broken down and the bridges are out, then we don't get the fuel, we get a backup, and we end up with all kinds of problems. So that leads me to an interesting study that was published in the journal PLOS1. Very fascinating because it looked at a control diet, okay, that was regular maintenance, compared to a 25% calorie restriction diet, compared to a 25% calorie restriction plus exercise diet. That diet did 12.5% calorie restriction from their nutrition and 12.5% caloric restriction through exercise. So one group just reduced calories 25%, the other group reduced calories 12.5%, but exercised another 12.5% to equal 25%. Well, what they were looking at is the genes that were expressed.
Not yet.
The caloric restriction groups, both of them, They had a heightened expression of genes that were associated with mitochondrial function. PPAR, SIRT1, ultimately PGC1A, things like that downstream of that. What this means is that, okay, being in a deficit increased the expression of genes that made the mitochondria stronger. Not a huge surprise, but it really is the goal that we're after, so that's good news. But what's really interesting is they saw an increase in what is called mitochondrial DNA, mDNA. Our mitochondria have their own DNA, and when we have higher levels of mDNA, it means we have more mitochondria, which is a good thing. Well, in this case, they saw a 35% increase in mitochondrial DNA in the calorie restriction group, and they saw a 21% increase in mitochondrial DNA in the calorie restriction plus exercise. If your sleep sucks, then everything else sucks. Okay, it changes your mood, it changes your perception of things, it changes your mental motor. So let's go ahead and look at how this works. Quick, pragmatic, tangible, somewhat rapid-fire things that you can do as a complete guide to improving sleep. We have to have an understanding of sort of the embryonic, education of sleep stages first. This all makes sense. Okay, you have 4 stages of sleep. 3 that are non-REM, 1 that is REM. Stage 1 is when you fall asleep on the couch and you kind of nod in and out and you swear up and down that you weren't asleep, but you were. Okay, that's the best way to describe it. Not a lot happening there. Then when we move into stage 2, this N2, this is where your body temperature starts to drop, things start to change, you start to get into these sleep patterns, you start to go through what are called sleep spindles, where you're having periods of slow wave sleep, so some memory consolidation. Again, it's not the one that's focused on the most, however, it's pretty important. Then we move into stage 3, which is the deep sleep. This is what's happening when it comes down to things like muscle repair. Okay, this is like deep cell regeneration, kind of the rejuvenation process for the physical body, really. Then you move into REM. Okay, REM is where your brain is almost as active as it would be during the day, but your body is immobilized. Muscles are immobilized, so you don't start literally acting out your dreams and weird stuff like that, right? So you have a lot of memory consolidation. They all have different benefits within each stage. And each time we disrupt this stage, we have a different issue that comes to be. If you disrupt REM, you disrupt memory. If you disrupt deep sleep, you disrupt muscle recovery and repair. So it's all important. There was an interesting study that found that motor performance, cognitive performance, and mood were all affected by even mild sleep impairment, with mood being the most affected. The reason that I say this as an important point is if your mood is affected, everything is affected. If you go into a workout with a crappy mood, you're going to have a crappy workout. It's trickle-down effect. So the mood really is everything. So have you ever noticed, oh, maybe I just was grumpy yesterday because I had a cruddy night of sleep. So getting into how we correct this kind of thing, because dealing with sleep issues is one of the most frustrating things. You feel out of control, you feel like you can't do anything about it, and sometimes you stress yourself out with these little sleep hygiene tactics to the point where you actually end up stressed before bed, and then you don't sleep at all, okay? Some of the biggest things that we can do to override that is to work with the synchronicity of our genes, synchronicity with our cells, our periphery, and our brain. And what that means is our brain has sort of a circadian clock. Okay, it's regulated by what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So our brain understands the 24-hour cycle. Our periphery, our peripheral cells understand a 24-hour cycle. But they are operating in different rooms, and they don't necessarily communicate with each other. Well, they do, but we need them to communicate with each other. We need to make sure that that door is open. If the door is closed and you have one set that's asleep during the day and one set that's awake during the day, that's not synchronicity. Okay, we need the brain and the tissues to be in harmony. Being able to synchronize this comes down to understanding when melatonin is increased and when cortisol is increased. And we come from this school of thought that cortisol should never be spiked. Cortisol absolutely should be spiked at certain times. It should ultimately be elevated shortly after you wake up in the morning, and its peak shortly after you wake up in the morning. If you look at the image that's on the screen right now, you'll see a very simple image that shows that. Okay, melatonin is increasing at night, then it comes down, and we have an increase in cortisol where it's peaking shortly after daylight starts, and then that comes down as the day goes on and melatonin starts to come up again. It's pretty simple. Some of the quickest ways that we can manipulate that, and one of the most powerful ways that we can manipulate that, is not through food, not necessarily through food timing, but it really is through light. And I'm not a total expert here, but I understand the basic fundamentals, and I've been able to use it personally to my advantage. There's a study that was published in the journal Physiology and Behavior that looked at this. They found that people that were simply exposed to brighter light in general, between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., ended up having improved levels of melatonin. If they were exposed to only dim light between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., they had suppressed levels of melatonin. So literally, the simple light exposure that we're just accustomed to is going to make a big difference. Arguably, sunlight being the best. Of course, we don't want to just sit under fluorescent lights all the time. But then there's some more data that suggests that early morning sunlight is the best possible, okay? And it's not because you're trying to encourage your body to wake up with the sun. In some ways, that makes sense from a biological perspective, but it's really about just those cues. You're not triggering the body, hey, be awake. You're triggering the body to just develop a rhythm. Think of it like that. Because I don't want you to think, oh, if I go and get sunlight at 6 a.m., my body's going to wake up at 5:45 a.m. every single day. That's not what we're after. We're after the body having natural hormonal and catecholamine changes to happen during those times. And if you can't get up early enough to go get sunlight, bright sunlight for 10 or 15 minutes shortly after you wake up, invest in a little red light therapy and do that. Arguably, one of the better ways to expose yourself to the right light in a really kind of nuancy fashion to get the right time. So that's something that you can do really powerfully. Another thing we have to remember here with light is that there was a study that demonstrated that when you are not sleeping in a dark room, even when you're asleep, okay, just sleeping in a room that has a little bit of light is going to suppress melatonin by 50%. Okay, that's huge. So just by having a window that's getting a lot of moonlight can affect your sleep. So sleep in a wicked dark room as much as you can. These are the kinds of things we don't think about. We leave the lights on until it's time to go to bed, and then it's time to go to bed and we turn them off. But if we actually turn them off a little bit sooner and we let our body adjust, 99% of people literally are going to have more melatonin and sleep better. Now we move into the foods. This is where things get kind of interesting, because with foods, this is a little bit nuancy, but there is some concrete stuff. We're going to start with the most concrete and kind of work our way down. I know that I've talked about maybe avoiding milk in the past, but when you look at the observational data, there was a meta-analysis looking at 14 different studies, demonstrated that across the board, when subjects had a little bit of warm milk before bed, they slept, not a little bit better, but significantly better. Now, maybe this is simply biological, maybe it's comfort. And that's probably the best, really, inkling that I have. Because you could say, there's some melatonin, there's some tryptophan in milk. I just don't think it's doing that much, but that's my personal opinion. I think there is a sort of innate comfort that comes from warm milk from when we were babies, right? It just makes sense that way. The caveat with that is if you drink milk before bed, you're probably going to have to pee. And Dr. Andy Galpin has talked about this. If you're peeing once in the middle of the night, that's okay, not great. If you're peeing twice in the middle of the night, there's something that needs to be adjusted. If you're peeing more than 2 times per night, you really need to look at something that's going on, because peeing in the middle of the night is one of the largest disruptors of sleep that's out there. So if you're going to have some warm milk, A, have it be warm, not hot. B, only do like a half a cup or so. And C, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but maybe make it a little bit more like some raw, unpasteurized milk, so you're not getting the milk that's denatured and devoid of all the potential nutrients and myristic acid, like the good fats that are in the milk in the first place. The next one is tart cherry juice, and I've done full videos on this because tart cherry juice is phenomenal stuff. There are some studies that show that when you have tart cherry juice, you have significantly better sleep in compared to placebo. In fact, there was another study that took a look at tart cherry juice and found that sleep improved by 84 total minutes. 84 total minutes more sleep. And this was measured by polysomnography. So this isn't just subjective scores. This is legitimate, objective data by plugging people into machines and seeing how they sleep over a longer period of time. Okay, we're talking a quarter to a half a cup of tart cherry juice. Yes, there's carbohydrates, so if you're doing low carb, it may not work. It also might be one of those things where even if you are low carb, maybe getting a little bit of sleep is better than being low carb with no sleep. So really think about that for a minute. What's wild about tart cherry juice is it also seems to improve subjective pain scores. Now, you may not realize it, but pain can be a big reason why you're not sleeping either, right? You don't realize that you have these subtle cues of pain that are just keeping you awake. So if you're modulating inflammation and reducing subjective pain scores, then maybe you're sleeping better that route, which leads to another study that looked at tart cherry juice specifically in marathoners. Okay, so with marathon runners, it said, okay, we're gonna give you tart cherry juice for 5 days prior to your marathon. And those that had the tart cherry juice before their marathons for 5 days, they ended up having reduced levels of lactate dehydrogenase, they had reduced levels of overall inflammation, IL-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Their overall recovery was better and their inflammatory and immune response was less, which is a little bit more like this objective, like mechanical data that we need to understand why subjective pain scores might have gone down. It's not total proof in the pudding, but it explains, maybe inflammation is reducing and we're sleeping a little bit better as a result. Then we come into this big question of carbs before bed or not. And this is a constant fight within, I guess I should say, the online community. It's not really a fight within the scientific community. Carbs before bed are gonna help me sleep. Carbs before bed are gonna keep me awake. Well, there's a fine line, right? Okay, first of all, if you do have carbs before bed, they should be 3 or 4 hours before bed. They should not be right before bed. Okay, and we'll talk about this in a second. But there was a study published in the Western Journal of Nursing Research that really just spelled it all out. They looked at high-fat diets, high-carb diets, and high-protein diets before bed. And they found that above all, high-protein diets led to the best sleep after a few months. They just led to more sleep. Didn't matter if you had high carbs or not, it was high protein was the winner. Now the reason behind this is we say that high carbs before bed or a few hours before bed are good because they spike insulin and that therefore allows the amino acids to go into the brain, okay? That is absolutely valid and that is true, okay? But you can conquer a lot of the same thing by getting more amino acids into the brain by just having more protein and creating more amino acids to be available. So you have less amino acids that are allowed into the brain because of an insulin spike, or you just create a bunch of amino acids by eating more protein. So there's a solution for both parties, right? Those that like carbs, have your carbs at night. It will help you. Those that don't like carbs, have your protein before bed. It's going to help you. But above all else, it does not matter who you are. Eating carbohydrates inside of 3 hours before bed is not a good thing. And you might think, oh, well, I can have this spike in blood sugar and then it's gonna crash me. I'm gonna go hypoglycemic and I'll fall asleep. That is true in theory, you will fall asleep. However, think about the counter-regulatory measures that your body puts in place. Okay, then what happens when your blood sugar drops? Adrenaline spikes, cortisol spikes, and not only is this not good because it wakes you up, because of course adrenaline's gonna wake you up, but guess what we're doing? We're having opposite antagonistic hormonal responses. We're having cortisol increase when melatonin's increased, and guess what? We're screwing up that whole circadian cue that we've been working so hard for again. So it has a deeper, more ingrained problem that it could occur from it. Now, a lot of the things I'm talking about, like tart cherry juice, things like even carbohydrates that you might want to have before bed, better options. I put a link down below for Thrive Market. They're an online membership-based grocery store. They've been on this channel for a number of years. That is a 30% off discount link. So if you're doing grocery shopping, you're trying to think, where can I find tart cherry juice? Where can I find all these things that Thomas is going to talk about and talks about? That link down below is awesome. It's 30% off your entire grocery order plus a free gift up to $50. So check out that link down below. So you go online, you sort by different diet type. You can literally search for a food. It's like Amazon, but so much better because it has good, real foods that are vetted out and everything's delivered to your doorstep in just a couple of days. So check that link out down below for 30% off your entire grocery order, whether it's $100 or $1,000. That link is down below in the description. A big thank you to them for allowing us to create this awesome content. Definitely recommend you check them out. Okay, from a food and supplementation side, with magnesium, one of the most vetted out sleep aids that you could have. Now I could tell you to go get 500 milligrams of magnesium from almonds, but you're gonna end up consuming thousands of calories in almonds. So this is one of those foods where I say, you might be better off using a supplement. Like dimagnesium malate is the one that I usually recommend, okay? Now, when you look at the data, 500 milligrams seems to be the gold standard. Now, 500 milligrams of magnesium published in this particular study, increase in sleep efficiency, decrease in sleep onset latency, increase in total sleep time, and increases in melatonin and decreases in cortisol. We're checking all these boxes here, okay? Now, the reasoning is interesting. Okay, there's a couple potential mechanisms here. For one, magnesium actually binds to what's called an NMDA receptor. This means an increase in sleep efficiency and binds to mechanisms here. For one, from almonds, but you're going to end up consuming thousands of calories in almonds. So this is one of those foods where I say you might be better off using a supplement. Like dimagnesium malate is the one that I usually recommend. Okay. Now, when you look at the data, 500 milligrams seems to be the gold standard. Now, 500 milligrams of magnesium published in this particular study, increase in sleep efficiency, decrease in sleep onset latency, increase in total sleep time, and increases in melatonin and decreases in cortisol. We're checking all these boxes here, okay? Now, the reasoning is interesting. Okay, there's a couple potential mechanisms here. For one, magnesium actually binds to what's called an NMDA receptor. This means it binds to a receptor in your brain. When that happens, you end up having a subsequent decrease in what's called adrenocorticotropin, which leads to a buildup of other compounds, which therefore reduce protein kinase A. When this happens, then you have less conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone. And I know I'm going off here, but pregnenolone is the first step in cortisol manufacturing in the body. So you're essentially at the very core inception, you're attenuating, you're turning down cortisol production. So that's one potential mechanism that magnesium works upon. The other simple mechanism is that magnesium binds to a receptor on the pineal gland, which directly influences melatonin production as well. So you're working two pathways. You're relaxing, reducing cortisol, and subsequently increasing melatonin, which is quite interesting. This next one is very interesting, and it also has to do with the sunlight at the same time. It's vitamin D. Now, how we came to this conclusion was there was a study that was looking at fatty fish consumption, and they found with this study, people that were consuming salmon and fattier fish ended up having like a 10-ish% increase in their sleep scores. Like, what's going on here? And sort of reverse engineering the process looked at like, okay, maybe vitamin D is the equation here. Now, I'm personally a much bigger fan of getting vitamin D from the sun than from food or supplements, whenever possible. But I also understand it's not always real for people. So if you're going to supplement vitamin D, I think starting at like 2,000 to 5,000 IUs is probably where to go, and do it with dinner a few hours before bed, not right before bed. You want to mimic. Think about how long it takes for that vitamin D to absorb, and you want it to sort of mimic as if you were getting sunlight, right? Here's what's interesting. This is somewhat of a hypothesis, but very interesting data. Okay, with vitamin D actually binds to receptors. Now we have something called tryptophan hydroxylase, which is a gene that is associated with the conversion of serotonin to melatonin, or rather tryptophan to serotonin and then serotonin to melatonin. Okay, so without this tryptophan hydroxylase gene, this conversion can't happen, which means we can't take the amino acid from protein, that tryptophan, and convert it into serotonin and ultimately into melatonin. Well, what does vitamin D have to do with this? What we're starting to see in the data is that vitamin D binds to a vitamin D receptor that is literally on the gene for tryptophan hydroxylase. And when vitamin D binds to this gene, it triggers more expression of this gene. So it creates more of this gene. It's like, we have a built-in biological incentive to get sunlight. And we have a built-in biological equation that the more sunlight we get, vitamin D, the more ability to sleep we have. It makes sense because the body says, oh, if you're out in the sun more, you're probably more active. So we need to make sure we encourage sleep for rest and recovery and rejuvenation. Who would have ever thought, right? So the more that we can express these genes, the better we can ultimately convert our protein into these usable sources for melatonin and sleep. Now let's get into the bad stuff. Caffeine probably goes without saying, but I bet you didn't know that even caffeine 6 hours before bed screws you up almost as much as having it 3 hours or even 0 hours before bed. There's a study that looked at that. Caffeine 0, 3, and 6 hours before bed, and they found that, guess what? 6 hours before bed wasn't a whole lot different than 3 hours, and 3 hours wasn't a heck of a lot different from 0 hours. Just because it's not amping you up doesn't mean that it's not affecting your sleep, okay? When you are occupying this adenosine receptor, it's affecting drowsiness, and that drowsiness could be affected to not allowing you to get into this deep sleep. So cut out the caffeine like 8 hours before bed. Should go without saying. Next one is interesting, spicy foods. Spicy foods have an adrenaline-like effect on the body, and there are some larger cohort studies that look at this. It's on like college students that were consuming high amounts of spicy food when they were like staying up late cramming for tests and stuff. That affected their sleep. So you start looking at the data, you say, oh, it has to do with the adrenaline response. Once again, spicy food does have that impact. Not to mention the subtle pain cues that you might get from the gastrointestinal tract when you wake up and you don't realize it because you have hot pipes in the middle of the night. And yeah, it doesn't exactly feel good. Anyway, moving on, alcohol is another one. I don't need to dive into a lot of detail there. Alcohol may knock you out, but I can promise you, you're not getting the sleep that you want. And then we come back to the refined starches again. Okay, if you're going to have refined starches or sugar, you gotta have it 3 hours before bed. That's just the rule, okay? And again, you might get by one night doing it, but if you start making it a habit, that's when you start running into the problems. Okay, now we need to jump into the timing for just a moment. With timing, things are intriguing because we have talked about intermittent fasting on this channel a lot as a huge benefiting factor or technique or lifestyle technique for sleep. And a lot of that comes from the fact that A, someone's losing weight, B, inflammatory modulation is improved, like you're decreasing inflammation. But I think really the big one is people lose weight, right? When they start losing weight, they're going to sleep better. And you look at like the case of sleep apnea, for instance. If you lose weight and you lose 1 pound of fat on your chest, that's 1 pound less pressure putting down on your chest when you're breathing, when you're sleeping, trying to breathe, trying to get good, deep, diaphragmatic, relaxed breaths. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse and say that intermittent fasting is magic for sleep. But what's interesting is that when you look at early time restricted feeding where you intermittent fast and then don't eat in the afternoon, evening, we see a big pivot towards being able to sleep better there. And that's interesting because there was a study published in the Journal of Sleep Research that looked at Ramadan. And it found when people going through Ramadan fasting, they're eating between the hours of like roughly 6 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. They're eating late, like late time restricted feeding, late intermittent fasting. Their sleep scores went to garbage. They had decreases in slow wave sleep and decreases in REM sleep that were not just small amounts, significant amounts. And this was also measured via polysomnography. It wasn't subjective. It was objective. In fact, the subjective scores were kind of interesting. People a lot of times think they're sleeping better because they're eating a lot of food before bed and they're tired and they're going to bed. Nope, it was affecting things negatively. And then when we talk about sleep apnea, there was a study published in Clinical Nutrition and ESPEN. This was interesting because it took a look at subjects with sleep apnea and it found that there was a very powerfully strong correlation between caloric intake, the amount of calories they consumed in the evening, and their occurrence of sleep apnea and their ability to sleep. This is interesting. So does this mean that intermittent fasting is bad? I think if intermittent fasting is successful for you in terms of losing weight, it's a good thing, but we still need to consolidate our calories. Even if we're eating later in the day, we need to consolidate them as early to our eating period as possible. So if you break your fast at 3 p.m., you should have a largest meal shortly thereafter and taper as the day goes on, and don't try to do the opposite where you're trying to increase calories as the day goes on. Now, a few really quick things that you can apply that are just lifestyle oriented. For one, hot baths before bed. This is going to allow you to be able to kind of vasodilate, and it cools the core when you get out. This natural thermoregulation triggers melatonin production. And studies demonstrate that a hot bath, if you just immerse yourself up to your neck, works almost as well as a sauna. So I don't want to hear the fact that you can't afford a sauna. You can still do this kind of stuff, and you don't need to do it every night, but you can do it to get yourself into the habit of it. Making your room super dark. This is another big one, okay? I talked about that before. But routine, okay? No matter what your routine, make it routine. Okay, have your vitamins set out, have your toothbrush set out. It makes a big difference as far as how the brain works and being able to relax and get into this routine. And then lastly, one of the things, and I hope you haven't turned off this video because this is one that's helped me immensely, we don't realize, especially if you carry muscle. Okay, muscle weighs more than fat, right? So if I have the amount of muscle that I have on my chest, and you put me next to someone that is morbidly obese and maybe 280 pounds or so, and they don't have much muscle, but they have a lot of fat, there's a good chance that I have just as much weight on my chest as that person has on their chest. Okay, that person probably has sleep apnea and probably has to be on a CPAP. But I'm fit, I'm young, I'm lean, I'm muscular. I don't need to be on a CPAP, right? Except the actual weight of my chest is actually equating to a similar amount of weight that's on his chest. So this is for the younger athletic or even older in athletic people that don't think they might suffer from sleep apnea. Now the other thing is you have to remember, if you train a lot and you have tight traps, you have a tight back, all this stuff, that restricts and constricts your breathing. And you can't get these big diaphragmatic breaths. So something that I've learned it from Dr. Peter Attia, is doing dead hangs. Just hanging from a bar for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, work your way up. Sometimes I even use wrist wraps so that I can hang and not have to worry about my grip, because what happens with that is you'll notice you get this deep diaphragmatic breath, and eventually it becomes habit. Because the way that we breathe, nasal breathing, big deep breaths, even nasal exhalation, triggers that parasympathetic nervous system, and it forces you to relax. Next thing you know, your back is more relaxed. You make this a habit and doing it a couple hours or even an hour before bed, and it's a huge difference in terms of training your body to get good diaphragmatic breaths. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I hope this video served as a complete guide, and I'll see you tomorrow.
yet. Wimp. Keep fighting, from victory to victory.
Hi, my name is Matt Walker. I am a professor of neuroscience at the University of California, Berkeley, and I am also the author of the book Why We Sleep. And I'm here to speak about some tips for getting better sleep and also some of the bad things that happen when you don't get enough sleep. So many of the things that evening is a story for CBD. So what happens if sleep, rapid eye movement sleep? And we know that REM sleep is essential for a variety of functions. People use to try and help them sleep inadvertently are actually harming and hurting their sleep. Two good examples are... Hi, my name is Matt Walker. I am a professor of neuroscience at the University of California, Berkeley, and I am also the author of the book Why We Sleep. And I'm here to speak about some tips for getting better sleep and also some of the bad things that happen when you don't get enough sleep. So many of the things that people use to try and help them sleep inadvertently are actually harming and hurting their sleep. Two good examples are probably alcohol and marijuana. Many people will have a little nightcap in the evening and they think that having a drink in the evening helps them fall asleep. It's actually not true. Alcohol is a class of drugs that we call the sedatives, and sedation is not sleep. So what you're doing when you drink in the evening is actually just knocking out your cortex, and you're going into this sedation-like state. You're not going into natural sleep. There are two other problems with alcohol, unfortunately, and I'm so sorry to be giving you this bad news, but firstly, alcohol will actually litter your sleep with many more awakenings throughout the night. And so you won't feel restored when you wake up the next morning by your sleep. You won't feel refreshed. The problem and the danger is that many people don't remember waking up so much throughout the night when they've been drinking. So they don't realize that it was the alcohol disrupting their sleep. They don't put two and two together. The final thing about alcohol is that it's very good at blocking your REM sleep, or your dream sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And we know that REM sleep is essential for a variety of functions, including emotional and mental health. And so alcohol will actually remove that dream sleep, or it will decrease it significantly, blocking that essential critical sleep. And I should also note, by the way, how essential is that REM sleep? Well, studies done back in the 1980s, some really quite shocking studies, demonstrated that if you deprive rats of rapid eye movement sleep, they will die almost as quickly as they would from total food deprivation. That's how essential that dream sleep is, and it's that dream sleep that you block with alcohol. What about, though, marijuana? Well, unfortunately, the news isn't so great there. A lot of people will, again, will use marijuana to help them relax and sort of to take away some of that anxiety that's preventing them from falling asleep. And certainly marijuana does seem to hasten the speed with which you fall asleep. But unfortunately, marijuana, like alcohol, but through actually a different biological mechanism, will also block your dream sleep. And if you're not getting that critical REM sleep, you can actually become more anxious, even more depressed the following day, and therefore people start to seek out more marijuana to sort of medicate those symptoms that the marijuana is causing because of the sleep disruption. So the advice right now is marijuana, like alcohol, but through actually a different biological mechanism, will also block your dream sleep. And if you're not getting that critical REM sleep, you can actually become more anxious, even more depressed the following day, and therefore people start to seek out more marijuana to sort of medicate those symptoms that the marijuana is causing because of the sleep disruption. So the advice right now is not to think of marijuana as a sleep aid. One of the other common aspects of marijuana is CBD oil, which is the non-psychoactive component of marijuana. THC is the sort of psychoactive part of marijuana. CBD, which is an oil that people use, a cannabinoid. Those studies have not been really done in a particularly detailed way, but from what we can tell from the limited data, CBD, the non-psychoactive form of marijuana, actually doesn't seem to impact sleep. So probably a little bit too early to make the definitive claim, but at least that seems to be the emerging story for CBD. So what happens if you've pulled an all-nighter or you've had a short night of sleep, maybe you went to bed too late and you need to wake up early again? Can you get back that lost sleep? Unfortunately, this is one of those myths. Sleep is not like the bank in the sense that you can't accumulate a debt and then hope to pay it off at a later point in time. And let me give you the evidence to make that point very clear. If I were to take an individual and deprive them of a whole night of sleep, 8 hours of lost sleep, and then I give them all of the recovery sleep that they want on a second night or a third night, yes, we see that they sleep longer. They try to sleep it off, as it were. But do they get back all of that 8 hours that they've lost? And the answer is no. Even if we keep measuring them, they never get back that sleep that they lost. So you cannot accumulate a debt and then hope to pay it off at a later point in time. And many of us do this in society. We're short sleeping during the week, and then we binge with our sleep at the weekend. It's what we call social jet lag, or what I sometimes describe as sleep bulimia. It's this binge purge sort of profile. Now, there was a recent study, a very interesting study, where they looked at the mortality risk of short sleep. And firstly, what they found is a quite shocking result. Those people who are sleeping 5 hours a night have a 65% higher likelihood of dying at any time. Increase of 65% in terms of mortality risk. However, if you get another group of people who are short sleeping, maybe just 5 or 6 hours a night during the week, but then sleep a little longer at the weekend, you can actually reduce some of that mortality risk. But there's a danger here. We know that that sort of social jet lag, binging at the weekend, short sleeping during the week, is associated not necessarily with a shorter life, but it's associated with a far less healthy life. You're far more likely to suffer from diabetes, to be obese, to have poor cardiovascular health and have cardiovascular outcomes. And if you look at that study, even though some people were trying to sleep back at the weekend some of that which they'd lost during the week, they were almost twice as likely to report being in very poor health relative to people who do what we generally recommend, which is consistently get good 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day, both during the week and the weekend. So the recommendation right now is to get consistent sleep, whether it's the weekend or the weekday. Keep doing that consistently. Unfortunately, sleep is not like a credit system, not that you would wish for, unfortunately. Should you use a snooze button? Well, certainly what I've said before is that regularity is critical, going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. And certainly using alarms can help you do that. And I use the word plural there, alarms. What I mean is not to have multiple awakenings in the morning. I mean, we should all set a to-bed alarm. You know, think about the time that you need to go to bed to get that 8-hour sleep opportunity, and then set the alarm maybe sort of 15 minutes before, and that's just the call. It's sort of like last orders at a bar. Now is the time to sort of start preparing to get ready for this sleep event. You can also, by the way, just sort of before sleep, in the last hour, you can sort of get into your pajamas or your sleeping clothes, brush your teeth, floss your teeth, do all of those things that end up taking away sort of an additional 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Get those in ahead of time. But what about the snooze button, though? Unfortunately, it's probably not a good idea, because there is some data that I discuss in the book where if you look at the cardiovascular response to an alarm, it's actually quite a stressful event for your cardiovascular system. We see a spike in heart rate, stress chemicals increase. Now, it's fine to use an alarm just that one time in the morning to wake you up, but you shouldn't really be hitting the snooze button, because then you are repeatedly assaulting your cardiovascular system. And you may think, well, you know, I only hit it maybe sort of 3 or 4 times, you know, how bad is that? Well, maybe for that one day it's not bad, but if you're doing that every single day, every week, every month, every year, every decade, across a lifetime, you can imagine the type of additional cardiovascular strain that that places on people. So use the alarm, that's fine, but try to use it once and then get up and have a good day.
Never felt better.
All right, I'm back again. Didn't we just meet yesterday? Well, I'm back today for another presentation. Today we're going to talk about how to get more REM sleep. Normally, a person will go through 90-minute cycles of sleep, okay? Between 4 and 6 of these cycles with different levels or stages. More deeper levels of sleep, that's called non-REM, and then you have the superficial level of sleep, which is called REM. Now, the non-REM sleep, which is the deeper delta wave sleep, occurs more in the first half of the sleep. And this is where you get body repair, you get detoxification, you get rejuvenation, you get more growth hormone stimulation. But then you have something called REM sleep, okay? What is REM sleep? REM is the more superficial sleep. It's the second half of your sleep. And this is where most people have the problem. So most people get the first part of sleep, but they're not getting that second half. They're not getting that full REM sleep. What's very interesting about REM sleep is that the wave patterns or the brain activity is almost identical to when you're awake, but you're actually in this sleep state. Now you would think if the brain activity is very similar to being awake, and the REM sleep is actually using sometimes even more energy than the awake state, you might wake up from this dream state actually exhausted and feeling like, wow, I just ran a marathon. Well, that's because you did. Your brain in that REM state has actually used more energy, which is pretty wild. But here's another interesting thing about the REM stage. You actually get more mental rejuvenation in the REM stage than you do in the non-REM stage. So in the non-REM stage, you're getting more physical rejuvenation, and in the REM stage, you're getting more mental rejuvenation. So you wake up feeling more mentally rejuvenated, improved memory, better learning. Interesting. Now in the REM stage, you're getting low muscle tone, you're dreaming, I just mentioned that. You're getting a massive stimulation of the brainstem that's causing this state, and you're getting a lot of acetylcholine being pumped out. That's a neurotransmitter that's causing the state. And you're getting virtually no activation of the serotonin or noradrenaline or adrenaline. And in REM sleep, you are more sensitive to temperature. So if the temperature is too cold or too hot, that can inhibit that stage. So now what does all this mean? What can we do with this data? Well, number one, we want to make sure that the muscles around our brainstem are completely relaxed when we go to sleep. I'm going to put a video down below of how to achieve this. You can either do this yourself with a treatment device like this, putting this back in your neck, these two little things right in the back, right underneath your skull, and lay back on a chair and let this device melt those muscles around your brainstem. Or you can have someone press into the point right underneath your neck, and I'll put a video link down below to show you how to do that. But it's a great way to relax the muscles around the brainstem, because if you go to sleep with all this tension in the upper part of your neck, it's going to be very difficult. All right, number two, you want to get your breathing balanced. And I've done videos on this. What happens when you have difficulty sleeping is usually your breathing is off. Usually your breathing is like, the inhalation is not the same as the exhalation. So you want to synchronize the two. You want to breathe in 3, 4, or 5 seconds, and breathe out 3, 4, or 5 seconds. Make sure that they're equaled up. Sometimes it'll be 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. Sometimes it'll be 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. But you want to just focus on your breathing. That will start to send signals into the brainstem, through the vagus nerve, to help you get into this state. All right, number 3, you want to adjust your blanket to make sure your temperature is correct. I know with my wife, she needs a thicker blanket. I use a thinner blanket, sometimes even a sheet. All right, number 4, you want to increase your acetylcholine. How do you do that? Vitamin B1. You can do nutritional yeast. You can do other types of B1, make sure it's natural, but take a little B1 before you go to bed. B1 is very important in your sleep cycles, especially when you're making acetylcholine, and especially when you've been through a lot of stress. B1 counters stress. B1 helps you counter nightmares. Anytime you have nightmares, that means you need more B1. All right, number 5, stress. Stress is the biggest barrier to your sleep. You're going to find out whatever's behind the stress and deal with it, do something to improve it, because the stress is the number one thing that will keep you out of both REM sleep and the non-REM sleep. Anyway, that's my summary on how to get more REM sleep. Thanks for watching. Hey, before you go, if you're benefiting from any of my content, I would love to hear about your success story. Please share it in the link down below.
A hearty Valga battle indeed. Wimp.
What is sleep, and why should you even care? When people think about being healthy, they think about eating right and exercise, but most people don't think about how important sleep is for their health. This includes both how much they sleep and the quality of sleep. So let me ask you this. When you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? Do you feel refreshed and ready to go? Or do you feel sluggish and groggy and maybe even grumpy? And this stat right here is crazy. According to the CDC, only 1/3 of adults actually get the recommended minimum 7 or more hours of sleep every night. The most common reason for this is trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, aka insomnia. This could be related to stress. It could also be related to too much caffeine or alcohol or side effects of medications. It could also be related to other habits that you don't even realize. But there are other medical conditions that could be the root cause of the problem, like sleep apnea, like depression. Whatever the reason, not getting good sleep takes its toll on your overall well-being and hugely impacts your productivity. Not getting good sleep impacts your life in so many ways. What happens is we're too tired to work efficiently, too tired to exercise, and our cravings for junk food go sky high. Not to mention, we're more likely to be in a bad mood. It also impacts our ability to drive a car. In fact, drowsy driving is responsible for a good portion of fatal motor vehicle accidents. Over time, sleep deprivation increases the risk of developing chronic medical conditions like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. The good news is that there are ways to improve the quality and quantity of sleep that you get. A lot of people are quick to reach for sleep medication, but usually that's not the solution. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand what sleep is, and other videos in the sleep series that I'm doing, we'll talk about different sleep issues that exist and ways that you can improve upon your sleep. So let's get started with talking about what sleep is. When you sleep, you go through different stages of sleep. There are two main types of sleep. There's REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement, and we'll get into that in a minute. The other main part of sleep is non-REM sleep, during which thinking and most bodily functions slow down, but movement can still occur. Every time you fall asleep, you enter non-REM sleep. To be more exact, in making the transition from wakefulness into light sleep, you spend about 5 minutes drifting off in stage N1 sleep. Here, your body temperature slightly drops, your muscles relax, and your eyes often move slowly from side to side. You lose awareness of your surroundings, but you're easily awoken. Then there's stage N2, which is considered light sleep, and it lasts about 10 to 25 minutes. Here, your eyes are still, and your heart rate and breathing are slower compared to when you're awake. Here, your brain intermittently disconnects from outside sensory input and begins the process of consolidating memories. Stage N3 is considered deep sleep. Here, your brain is less
Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. If you're new, my name is Shenfu, and I'm a third-year pre-med undergrad at the University of Washington, Seattle campus. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the Keychron K1 and the Keychron K2, and which one I use in my daily life as a student. Since they both cost within $5 of each other, there's absolutely no point in comparing their costs and doing any kind of price analysis. If you are looking to buy a Keychron keyboard, you've probably already gotten your mind made up on what kind of layout you like. The only question then becomes, should you go with the standard profile or a lower profile? But before getting into the actual video, I would like to throw out some disclaimers. If you don't care about these and just want to skip ahead, then timestamps for all of the categories are in the video description down below. So disclaimer number 1 is that this video will not explain why you should go mechanical. If you're interested in more information on that, I recommend any other video on that topic. This video is going on the basis that you've already made up your mind that you want a mechanical keyboard, you just don't know if you want a standard profile or a lower profile. Disclaimer 2 is that I'm not a professional gamer or a professional typist, so all content of this video is strictly my own opinion from my research and experience using both keyboards as a student throughout a couple of weeks of my quarter system school. However, one thing to note is that I was previously diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome because I was having mild and severe symptoms at the age of 16. So one thing that is extremely important to me is wrist health. That being said, first an introduction to the keyboards. For the standard mechanical keyboard, I have with me the Keychron K2 with the Gatoron red switches. This is a 75% layout, which is actually my preferred layout because that tends to mirror what most laptop keyboards have. And since most of my experience before switching over to full-size keyboards was with laptop keyboards, I do prefer the 75% layout, or at the very minimum, I can work very efficiently with it. One thing to note about this layout, though, is that the right shift key has been shortened to make space for the up arrow, very similar to the old Razer Blade Stealth keyboards. And so if you weren't a fan and you use a right shift a lot, then the 75% layout is obviously not for you, and you'd be more interested in the 10 keyless system on the Keychron K1. One other cool layout feature with the Keychron K2 and its 75% layout system is the fact that they've decided to group their function row as a group of F1 through 4, so 4 keys, and then F5 through 9, which is 5 keys, followed by F10 through 12, which are just 3 keys. And for the 75% layout, I think this makes a whole lot of sense, because F7 through 9, you'll notice all 3 of those keys double up as media control keys. And so having those be 2 different colors, or separated by space as they are in the 10 keyless Keychron K1, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In fact, even in the Keychron K1, if they decided to not go with the standard 10 keyless system where they group the F keys into 3 groups of 4, I would have been perfectly fine with that. In fact, I probably would have enjoyed it if that middle group was a 5 or a group of 2 or 3. It's just something that you have to keep in mind, that the fast forward key is not directly right next to the play pause button. So in general, about both of these layouts, I wasn't particularly annoyed by anything. They're both pretty nice layouts and relatively standard. I just enjoyed the Keychron K2 a lot more because everything was just a lot closer together. But if you have larger hands and you want your keys to have more space between them, then the 10 keyless on the K1, or really any 10 keyless, would be your preferred go-to. Just because on this keyboard, if your hands aren't small, you will very easily overreach, and instead of pressing the 1 key, you'll press F1. And even with my not particularly giant-sized hands, I still sometimes overshot when trying to hit the number row. Just because it's not very clearly distinguished between the number row and the F row. And the orange escape keycap, which I thought would help, doesn't really help at all. But on to the next major difference between the two keyboards, and that is obviously their height. Now, if you're someone who's using the Keychron K2, then you will notice that this keyboard is actually a little taller than most other mechanical keyboards. Like when I compare this to my keyboards from HyperX, this is noticeably taller. So that's just something you want to keep in mind, is that if you're going to buy a Keychron product and compare it to a mechanical keyboard that you already have, then this one might end up being just taller in general, which is really where this low profile thing comes in, is because the low profile is going to be shorter than most mechanical keyboards. But it will still give you the same mechanical switch customization options, but with low profile switches. Same thing with the keycaps. And so that really brings us into the difference in their cases. So with Keychron K2, you'll notice that the side margins or borders are actually a little bit raised, so that they cover the bottom ends of the keycaps on the K2. Whereas with the K1, it's like completely left open, so it's very easy for someone to just pull off the control keycap, or really any of them. Putting them back on is also just as easy. But with the Keychron K2, with that raised border, that's almost definitely not going to happen, especially since these have the Gatoron red switches, which are linear switches, and so they basically don't have a tactile bump, which means that even if you apply pressure from the side, because of that angle, it'll still end up forcing the key down. And so it's very difficult for me to imagine like any of these keycaps falling off if I were to just take this keyboard as is and like throw it into my backpack. Whereas with the Keychron K1, I'd really feel more comfortable if I wrapped it up to make sure that the keycaps don't just get lost in my backpack. Then again, most people don't travel with mechanical keyboards, but in case if you want a keyboard that is going to work with a lot of your devices, and you're a student like me who's going to a university that's far away from your home, then maybe it does make sense to have something like a Keychron that you can put into your backpack and just lug back with you. Now, another difference you'll probably notice between the K1 and K2 is this caps lock and battery indicator light. Now, this battery indicator light starts flashing and being really annoying when the keyboard's battery is low to remind you to charge it, assuming you've been using it on wireless mode. If you are using it on wired mode, obviously you don't have to worry about that. Both of them use USB-C for their wired connections. So that's amazing, considering that it's 2021 and everything should be USB-C at this point. But having that battery indicator exactly like where you'd be able to see it while using the keyboard is incredibly useful in case if you are going on one of your wireless sprees. With the Keychron K2, there is no such battery indicator, nor is there a caps lock indicator. However, if you press the caps lock, then the caps lock key, rather than lighting up white, will actually light up in red. And that's how you'll know that the caps lock is on. So the caps lock indicator is not like particularly relevant, but I do like the fact that the K1, which has space for it, does have it. But the lack of a battery indicator is much more annoying. That flashing battery light indicator on the K1 is going to catch your attention. But on the K2, there's no such thing. So if you're using it in its wireless mode because you just like don't like wires or something, and you're like done typing, you're stretching your wrist, and you see the lights go off because the keyboard goes on rest mode, or you put it on one of these burst modes where it only lights up after you press the key itself, which is a very, very cool feature in general, but if your keyboard is on one of these modes, then it could possibly just die and you'd never know. Now, with the Keychron K2, there are red and green LEDs directly built into the charging port, so when you plug it in, if it's showing red, that means it needs charging, and when it's showing green, it means it's fully charged. But I've never noticed those actually flashing when battery level gets low, which is kind of something that you'd want to know. Like, yeah? Comparing the two keyboards side by side though, what you will notice is that the Keychron K2 is actually much shorter than the Keychron K1. So despite the Keychron K1 being low profile, that doesn't actually mean that it's the shortest, because what controls length is its actual layout format, which is 75% versus 10 keyless. The next step up after 10 keyless, of course, being a full-size keyboard, which also has a number pad on the right-hand side. And that is the keyboard layout that I am most accustomed to using, because I do use a HyperX alloy core as my daily driver before I switch to the Keychrons, because ran out of desk space, and full-size keyboards take up a lot of desk space. But now, one thing that really annoys me with the Keychron K1 is that it's low profile, that's nice, it's got that aluminum body that's also extremely nice, but it doesn't have any height adjustment. Like, it's just stuck at this one height. Like, if there were just like tiny little legs that could pop out from the bottom, I'd be fine if they didn't make this a fully aluminum case and rather use like hard plastic like they used on the Keychron K2. Like, it doesn't need to be aluminum. Like, plastic would have been fine, but I would have loved if it had some kind of like system to adjust height. Because at this point, it's basically like a mechanical version of an Apple Magic keyboard, and it's just like, why? Because at this point, really, with the way that this thing is set up, without any height adjustment, it's practically the same as like the Apple Magic keyboard, but mechanical, right? Like, the Logitech K380 is like kind of the same situation, where it's like an Apple Magic keyboard, but connects to 3 Bluetooth devices. The Keychron is literally just a mechanical version of that, because it also connects to 3 Bluetooth devices, has practically all the same keys, but it's longer, because 10 keyless, and it's mechanical. Like, why would you go for this for $80, like, even though it's low profile, when it's not giving you the low profile experience that you would expect out of a mechanical keyboard, with good height adjustment, getting better angles so that your wrists are like less strained? Like, that is all kind of important, but this thing just kind of stuck at the angle that it is. Unless, of course, you decide to put something underneath it on just the front end. In which case, yeah, I guess you have made your own like height adjustment. It would have been nice if that had just been built into the keyboard from the start. Especially when you're considering the Keychron K2, which has 2 sets of height adjustments. Like, it doesn't have one leg, it has one leg that has another leg inside of it. So you can actually have this at its standard profile, then you can pop out the 2 large legs that include the 2 smaller legs inside them for an extremely big height adjustment, or you can just pop out those smaller inner legs for a more medium height adjustment. Like, you have options when you're using the Keychron K2, but with the Keychron K1, those options simply do not exist. Now, talking a lot about adjustment, I guess the topic that comes logically after that is customization. The Keychron K2, being a very standard keyboard, means you can use very standard mechanical keycaps for it and replace them to like fit your color scheme and fit your theme. The K1, being low profile, is kind of hard to find switch replacements. It's going to be very annoying to find different keycaps as well. Like, it's a hassle. And so the K2 is going to be much easier to customize, whereas the K1, like, yeah, sure, you could probably find someone who will create those keycaps for you, but it'll be a hassle. Like, which is not particularly the fault of Keychron in any way, shape, or form, because that really just requires more third parties to be interested in making these things, which means more people need to be buying low-profile mechanical keyboards for more people to be interested in making keycaps for them. But speaking of keycaps, one nice thing that Keychron included with both of these keyboards were replacement caps for the Option and Command key, as well as the one that controls their lighting setting, as well as the Escape key. And so if you don't want the orange Escape key, or you want an orange lighting control key, then you can swap those out with the keycaps that come in the box with your keyboards. Same thing with the Option and Command key. If you're primarily a Windows user, such as myself, then you can replace the Option and Command key with the Windows button and the Alt key. And so that option is there. Now, of course, they didn't have to include that with the K2 because you could probably just get your own. But with the K1, especially being low profile and being a pain in the ass to find spare keycaps for, that's a very nice extra thing to throw in the box. Especially since they are marketing their keyboards as something people can use with both Windows and Mac operating systems. Like, they literally have physical switches that you can switch. For the K2, it's on the left-hand side, and for the K1, it's on the top, which will change it from Mac to Windows mode. Now, for someone like myself, who does a lot of my daily work on my Asus Zephyrus G15, which is a Windows laptop, and my iPad Pro 2020, having the ability to, with a simple button flick, switch between my Windows option and the Mac system is actually, like, it's great. I love that. So generally, I'd say that in terms of design, both of them have their pros and cons. Again, this review is not really a review, and instead is more of just a feature comparison. And speaking of features, the next thing we needed to talk about anyway was connectivity. And the greatest feature in connectivity is the ability for each of these Keychron keyboards to be connected to up to 3 devices. Not simultaneously, but it's very easy to switch between the 3. All you have to do is press the FN key, and then hit 1, 2, or 3, depending on which one you've programmed, and directly from the keyboard you can control whether it's connected to your laptop, your iPad.
So, we've not spoke about the Flash movie that stars Ezra Miller. He is the main star of the movie because they can't get rid of him because he's literally in every scene. So, over the last few days, there's been a lot of misleading information going around. So your boy, War Drizzy, aka War Stew here, to dispel and debunk whatever's been going around because it's pretty much reverting back to the original information that we already reported on. And also, Michael Keaton is going nowhere. Stop listening to people saying Michael Keaton's role is being massively reduced in the Flash movie. Well, if that's the case, the whole movie's going to reduce massively in terms of runtime. So, what is good, YouTube boys? You here, if you are new around here, make sure to subscribe to never miss any of the Marvel, DC, pop culture-based content that we try to deliver on a daily basis. If you could subscribe to the channel, please turn notifications on and let me know down below how excited are you for the Flash movie. Right, if you could follow us on Instagram at @WarStew to see the beautiful face behind the beautiful voice, that would be much appreciated. And also check us out on the Twitter sphere. WarStewG. We're not verified. So, let's break it down. So, we're going to go in no particular order. So, as I've been saying for the longest time possible, do not expect Ezra Miller to be the Flash much longer than after the Flash movie, because all the bad PR, they don't need it. They can replace him instantly in a post-credit scene, or just bring a new Flash in after the movie. Now, recently a new report has come out, which is literally just saying the same thing that people like My Time to Shine, people like Grace, people like Casey Walsh said multiple times, up to 6 months ago. Don't expect Ezra Miller to be used in the promotional material for The Flash, even though he apologized. Okay, cool. We know he apologized because he was literally forced to apologize. There was 3 choices initially in the Hollywood Reporter article. So the first one was, if Ezra Miller could give an interview at some point explaining their erratic behavior over the past few years, the actor could do limited prep. Then the second option was, if Ezra Miller didn't reach out for help, Warner could still release a movie. The third situation was, with Miller, would be they would see Warner's killing the movie outright, just striking it. So essentially, it looks like what's going on at the moment is he's done and dusted. And if he does anything else, he's definitely done and dusted. So I don't understand why people keep sending me articles and stuff, because it's pretty much there. So a new report comes out saying, yo, Ezra Miller's future in the DCU is still uncertain. No, it's not. It's always been uncertain. This is not a new report. This is someone just repeating information that other people predominantly said. So let's go to the Keaton role. The Keaton role cannot be reduced in the Flash movie because you would have to reduce the whole movie. Michael Keaton shooted a lot for this movie. You would have to fundamentally destroy the plot of the movie. This is not a plot leak video, but go and look for the plot leak from the test screener. Michael Keaton is a pinnacle member of this movie. Like, he's in this movie a lot. It's not just a 5-minute cameo like he would have been in Batgirl. And also, the screen testing for the Flash movie was very positive and nostalgic because Michael Keaton's going to be in it. So they haven't got rid of Michael Keaton in this movie. And as far as we here on the channel know, based on the information that's going around the internet, the ending of this movie has not changed. Yes, sure, there could be a scene with Sacha Kali Supergirl meeting Henry Cavill Superman, but that does not change the ending. That is literally a 1 to 2 minute scene that predominantly does not change the ending at all. So when I see these reports going around going, yep, Hans Zimmerman's score to be in Man of Steel 2, I'm thinking, hang on a minute. Yes, Charles Roven, producer. There is no script, which means no plot. I don't understand how people keep believing these false stories. And then people keep sending me stuff going, there is no definitive story. Ideas locked for Henry Cavill's future as Superman. They haven't even got a pitch done yet. They have not accepted the pitch. Sure, the studio's head could have plans. James Gunn, Pete Safran, they could have plans of the villain and all that kind of stuff, but nothing is locked because there's no script. This is hilarious and ridiculous, lads. So Fandom Wire puts out an article. Superman will no longer be portrayed as having killed General Zod. Man of Steel 2 reportedly rebooted instead of it being a sequel. Raises Henry Cavill Superman's most defining moment. Okay, so the plot leak for the Flash movie said essentially, baby Superman gets killed in Krypton. And then what happens is we get a fight with Sacha Kali Supergirl fighting Fiora and Zod, hence why they were seen at the filming for Flash. So I'm really confused here. What are you saying? Are you saying that the Sacha Kali Supergirl fight versus Zod and Fiora is not going to happen? Are you saying they're going to revisit the fight and Henry Cavill Superman does not break Zod's neck? Are we saying that's not happening? I'm really interested to see if the Sacha Kali Supergirl fight versus Jean Zod is still going to happen, because predominantly, I know you guys are going to hate to hear this, not much of the movie has changed. Sure, they've done reshoots, but not much has changed. You should still expect, careful spoilers so don't ruin your life, you should still expect Ben Affleck to get stuck in an alternate universe asking the Flash for help, and that's a setup that will set up Crisis. You should still expect that. Now I get it, there's loads of little websites claiming exclusivity. According to the giant freaking robot, they announced the Man of Steel 2 sequel would not be as promised. Instead, it will serve as a soft reboot. Although the DCU had established the origins of the comic book famed character, it is now very much in the cards for Superman to never face the events that built up to the climactic battle in Metropolis with the Kryptonians. Really? So they're gonna erase one of the best fights ever. Giant freaking robot. MickeyMouse.com. WeGotItCovered.com. Don't listen to any of them. Seriously. This is just spitballing. So you're saying, just because Henry Cavill's coming out saying, yeah, I want a lighter version of Superman. He said that from day. He said that for the last 5 years. God, it's so easy to manipulate the audience based on little information that Henry says, and you make an article saying that they're going to get rid of the whole scene. Well, they would have got rid of the whole scene in the Flash movie originally by killing off Superman. Thus far, that scene would never have happened. But a fight between Zod and Sacha Kali Supergirl is meant to go down anyway. So what are you lads trying to say? I don't understand what you're even trying to say here. So please stop listening to these little websites because they throw 1,000 darts and sometimes some of them hit. Ezra Miller's The Flash. We don't know what's going to happen. It's most likely that he's out. Most likely he's out. Man of Steel 2, no one knows what's happening with Man of Steel 2 because careful for spoilers, there is no script. There is no script writer. There is no pitch. There is nothing. Keaton has not been reduced in The Flash. Do not let any little websites, any little Twitter person that's bought verification on Twitter Blue let you think anything different. They are not getting rid of Keaton scenes in the movie because whatever they were planning to set up is still going to be set up under the new plan of David Zaslav with James Gunn, with Pete Safran, and that is it. I don't keep having to go over stories that I already know are not true, but I'm not a scooper. But I am going to add comments to what people are saying. So literally nothing new has changed in the Flash movie. Major reshoot. Well, adding Henry Cavill Superman is not major reshoots. Sure, they might change a few things here or there, but the main narrative of the test screen information is still 100% true. It really is shocking to me. Really is shocking. And then you get some jokers say, I mean, I don't know how these jokers are even coming out with this. So Ezra Miller is going to be in Man of Steel 2, apparently making a cameo in Man of Steel 2, and Andy Muschietti is going to be apparently directing this movie. And then the same source is like, yo lads, I don't actually know if Ezra Miller's going to be in the DCEU after The Flash. You see what's happening here? Literally, they're spinning things in different ways. No one knows what's happening in Man of Steel 2. Sure, Metallo could be in it. Sure, Brainiac could be in it. Sure, Lobo could be in it. Sure, literally, guys, no one knows anything about the future of the DCEU post The Flash movie, post Aquaman 2, post Shazam Fury Gods, post Blue Beetle. And now jokers are like, yo, Black Adam's going to appear in a movie. Your boy War Stew said this. It doesn't make any sense to put Black Adam in the Flash movie. It doesn't make any sense to put Black Adam in Shazam 2 because The Rock doesn't like Shazam. That makes no sense. I mean, sure, it makes a narrative standpoint to have Black Adam at the end of it. That would make a lot of sense. But The Rock does not like Shazam. Oh, well, Shazam would have appeared in the Black Adam and vice versa. It makes even less sense to put him in Blue Beetle. It makes even less sense to put him in Aquaman 2 unless there's some kind of Superman setup. I don't know. Just stop listening to little Twitter scoopers and start listening to your boy, War Stew, the realest person on the internet. Now, I'm not here to debunk people, just people keep sending me articles and sending me links and sending me tweets, and I'm going to go over them. So, because you guys seem to like me doing this, so also in the